For 3 years, Commander Elise Ward's name sat etched in black granite on a wall at the Naval Memorial. Official records listed her as killed in action. A convoy ambushed deep in the Horn of Africa, no remains recovered, presumed lost with her entire team. Her parents received the folded flag. Her younger brother gave a speech at the funeral, voice breaking as he promised to carry her legacy. The Navy closed the file. The world moved on. But the world had been wrong. On a humid Tuesday morning, when recruits were struggling through log PT on the beaches of Coronado, a black helicopter skimmed across the Pacific horizon and sat down on the sand with the casual authority of someone who didn't need clearance. Out stepped a woman the Navy hadn't seen in 3 years. Same steel blue eyes, same scar tracing her jawline, but harder now. Her hair was shorter, her posture even more severe, her silence sharper than any salute. The instructors froze mid-yell. The recruits dropped the log, panting in the surf, trying to understand why a ghost had just stepped out of a rotor wash. And before the whispers could spread, the Master Chief barked one sharp command to the entire beach. "On your feet." "That's Commander Ward." The recruits scrambled upright. Nobody dared ask the question on every mind, how is she standing here? Before we explain the truth of those missing years, and why her return would change the SEALs forever, pause for a second. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you believe in second chances, because the story you're about to hear proves that sometimes the most dangerous operators are the ones you already buried. The last official sighting of Elise Ward was a grainy drone feed. Her convoy winding through a canyon carved by centuries of dry wind. Radio chatter clipped, confident, routine. Then, detonation. A rolling wall of fire. The blast swallowed vehicles whole, hurled armored steel like children's toys, and cut the feed to static. By the time quick reaction forces arrived, nothing remained but scorched wreckage and shattered terrain. The report wrote itself, no survivors. But Elise had survived. Pinned beneath twisted steel, lungs burning from smoke and dust, she clawed free with broken fingers and crawled into brush while enemy patrols swept the canyon floor. For 3 days she moved at night, half-conscious, bleeding, delirious, driven by nothing but stubborn refusal to die in the dirt. On the 4th night, dehydrated and drifting near collapse, she was found, not by American forces, but by a shadow network that officially didn't exist. Contractors, rogues, allies of convenience. People who operated in the cracks between governments. They pulled her into the dark and gave her a choice, vanish forever, or serve in a war that didn't make the evening news. For 3 years, the world believed Elise Ward was gone. In truth, she was running missions buried so deep in classified ink that even the Pentagon couldn't track them. Denied territory infiltrations. Asset extractions. Operations where failure wasn't reported because existence was never acknowledged. She became a weapon wielded quietly, without ceremony, without record. But weapons eventually returned to the armory. Her reappearance wasn't an accident. She had come back with orders. The Navy SEALs, the same institution that had buried her, needed her alive. Not as a symbol. Not as a veteran trotted out for morale. But as a leader. The brass wanted her to take over a unit that had been bleeding talent, losing cohesion, struggling under the weight of 2 decades of endless conflict. They wanted a ghost to breathe fire back into the teams. The first thing Elise did was walk the grinder. No fanfare, no press release. Just boots on asphalt where generations of SEALs had been broken and rebuilt. Recruits looked at her like a phantom. Instructors who had trained beside her years ago stood at silent attention. She said nothing for the first week. She just watched. Watched the hesitation in corners, the wasted movement in reloads, the arrogance in cadences shouted too loud, too proud. She catalogued every weakness with those cold eyes. At chow, she ate alone near the far wall, tray arranged with surgical precision. She never sat with her back exposed. Never let conversation distract her hands from methodically cutting food into exact bites. More than one instructor whispered, "She's different now. Harder. Like something stayed behind out there. It wasn't until the obstacle course that the recruits understood just how different. The course was designed to break them: walls, ropes, wires, pits, smoke grenades thick enough to choke the sky. Halfway through, the instructors detonated a flashbang simulator, standard stress inoculation. Recruits flinched. Some stumbled. One froze. Elise didn't even blink. She moved straight through the blast cloud, eyes locked forward, pace unbroken. Like she'd lived inside concussive blasts so long they had become background noise. The whispers spread faster than the smoke: she's not normal. She's been somewhere else. She's done things no one here can imagine. That night, in the barracks, one recruit tried to joke. Guess being dead for 3 years makes you fearless. Nobody laughed. The silence that followed was heavier than steel. But Elise had noticed more than their fear. She'd noticed the fractures in the unit, the way certain recruits mocked the weaker ones, the way arrogance had replaced quiet professionalism. She'd seen a culture drifting, and she intended to reset it the hard way. By the end of the second week, the nickname stuck: the Revenant. Not whispered with mockery, but with awe. Some said she'd bargained her soul back from the fire. Others swore her eyes glowed in the dark. Legends grew fast in a place where pain was constant and hope scarce. But legends alone don't win wars. And Elise wasn't here to haunt. She was here to lead. The real test came during the Kill House evaluation. A scenario designed to measure leadership under live fire simulation. Her squad included the loudest doubters, a lieutenant polished to perfection, his trio of sycophants, and a handful of recruits who'd never been in real chaos. On paper, Elise wasn't even supposed to take point. She was there as an observer, a symbol. But when the squad froze outside the second door, panic rising with every wasted second, Elise simply shouldered her rifle and moved. What followed didn't look like training. It looked like inevitability. She flowed through rooms as if gravity itself bent to her trajectory. Targets fell before recruits registered their presence. Angles cleared themselves. Her weapon tracked threats like it had memory. She called no orders. She didn't need to. The squad, even the arrogant lieutenant, fell into her wake, swept forward by momentum too undeniable to resist. When the buzzer finally sounded completion, the stopwatch revealed the impossible: a record time, untouched for years, obliterated as though it had never been a challenge. The instructors stared at the time on their clipboards, then at Elise. Some shook their heads, others just looked away. None of them wanted to admit what they all felt, all mixed with a sharp edge of fear. You couldn't watch someone move like that without realizing you were standing next to a weapon sharpened far beyond regulation. The recruits didn't cheer. They didn't dare. They just looked at her with a silence that spoke louder than noise. The lieutenant, who had strutted his way through every exercise until now, took off his helmet and muttered under his breath. That wasn't training. That was something else. Elise ignored him. She unloaded her rifle, cleared the chamber, and placed it on the rack with the same calm efficiency she gave every motion. Then she looked at the squad and said only one sentence. Real combat doesn't forgive hesitation. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a lecture. But it landed harder than anything the instructors had shouted all year. That night, word spread beyond the barracks. Across Coronado, SEAL candidates whispered about the commander who'd been buried and returned. The Revenant, they called her now. Not Elise Ward. Not ma'am. Just the Revenant. And even the veterans stopped correcting them. But while legends rose, Elise was waging a quieter battle. Every evening, when the recruits were asleep, she stayed awake. Cleaning her weapon. Running dry drills. Staring out at the ocean with eyes that never softened. She wasn't simply here to prove she was alive. She was measuring the Navy itself, testing whether its culture could still produce warriors who bled discipline instead of ego. One evening, Master Chief Donovan found her alone on the grinder, shadowboxing under the floodlights. "You're pushing them hard," he said. "They're soft," Elise replied without looking at him. "Too much talk, not enough silence. Too much performance, not enough precision. They think endurance is shouting louder. They've forgotten endurance is surviving longer." The chief studied her. "You're not just training them. You're reshaping them." Elise stopped moving. Her silhouette cut against the light like a statue carved from steel. "The world reshaped me. I'm just passing it along." By the third week, the recruits understood. Morning PT was no longer a contest of noise. It became a contest of focus. Elise punished arrogance with silence. If someone boasted, she ignored them. If someone faltered but pushed forward without excuse, she gave a single nod. That nod became more valuable than any shouted praise. But change bred resistance. Lieutenant Keating, the golden boy with the perfect teeth and perfect posture, wasn't about to let his authority slip without a fight. He had been raised on the idea that officers commanded respect by virtue of rank. Watching Elise strip that respect down to raw competence burned him alive. He tried small challenges at first. Questioning her calls in front of recruits. Mocking her ghost story background. Hinting that she had gone rogue during those missing years, maybe even betrayed her oath. Elise never reacted. She didn't rise to his bait, didn't even spare him the courtesy of confrontation. She just kept performing, kept dismantling every test with cold precision until Keating's protests sounded more like insecurity than leadership. But pressure always finds a crack. The breaking point came during a night evolution. A simulated hostage rescue in the kill house, darkness layered with smoke, recruits blind but for the faint glow of muzzle flashes. Keating's squad was running the scenario. Elise was there as silent observer. Halfway through, Keating made a fatal error. He cleared a corner sloppily, exposing his flank. The hostile actor inside the room tagged him center mass. In training terms, he was dead. But instead of calling it, Keating ignored the hit and kept pushing. His recruits followed, confused, their comms filling with static as chaos multiplied. Elise saw it all. She saw the arrogance, the refusal to acknowledge failure, the way Keating risked every life in that room to preserve his own ego. She stepped in without hesitation. Index. Simulation terminated. Keating spun on her, helmet visor fogged with sweat. "You don't have authority to call Index. I'm in command." Elise's voice was calm, but it cut through the smoke like steel through silk. "You died, Lieutenant. When you died, command shifted. Pretending otherwise puts everyone else in the grave beside you." The recruits froze. For the first time, someone had spoken aloud the truth they all felt: Keating wasn't leading. He was performing. Keating tried to laugh it off. "This isn't real combat. It's training." Elise stepped closer until the air itself seemed to contract. "Training is where you learn not to get your people killed. And tonight, you failed that test." The silence that followed was heavier than the smoke. In that moment, Keating's authority collapsed. He wasn't the leader anymore. He was just another trainee who'd been shown his limits. The next morning, Elise gathered the recruits on the grinder. She said nothing for a long time, just let the surf pound behind her and the sun rise slow over the horizon. Then she spoke 3 words. Discipline is freedom. Not a motto. Not a slogan. A creed. She explained that discipline, the ruthless control of body, weapon, and ego, was the only thing that kept warriors alive when chaos swallowed order. Freedom came from mastering yourself so completely that no enemy could dictate your fate. From then on, recruits repeated those words under their breath when exhaustion hit. Discipline is freedom. They whispered it in the surf, in the mud, on the ropes. And slowly, it changed them. But Elise wasn't finished. One evening, Master Chief Donovan found her studying the rosters in the command office. "You've turned them around," he said. "But the brass didn't bring you back just to polish trainees. They want results in the field." Elise didn't look up. "Then it's time they see what ghosts can do." 2 days later, the order came down, a joint live exercise with an active Ranger battalion. SEAL candidates versus Rangers in a full-scale mock operation across 20 square miles of scrub desert. Objectives: capture the flag, extract under pressure, neutralize opposing force. The recruits stared at the mission briefing like it was a death sentence. Facing Rangers wasn't training, it was trial by fire. But Elise only said, "Good. Let's see if the dead can still fight." When the exercise began, the desert swallowed sound. Heat shimmered, radios crackled, Rangers moved with lethal efficiency. On paper, the SEAL candidates were doomed. Outnumbered, outgunned, outexperienced. But Elise didn't play by paper. She played by shadows. She broke the squad into small cells, each moving independently, striking fast then vanishing before retaliation. She used the terrain like an ally, guiding them through ravines where drones couldn't track, timing movements with wind gusts that masked noise. At one point, a Ranger platoon cornered one of her cells. From the observation ridge, instructors leaned forward, ready to mark the SEALs captured. But then Elise appeared on the flank, silent and surgical. In less than 2 minutes, she dismantled the Ranger perimeter with feints and diversions so clean they looked rehearsed. The recruits slipped away like smoke. By dawn, when the final horn blew, the impossible had happened. The SEAL candidates had not only survived, they had captured the Ranger flag and extracted with fewer casualties than expected. The after-action report from the joint exercise spread fast, whispered in hallways and passed quietly between offices. Nobody wanted to admit it publicly, but the conclusion was undeniable. Commander Elise Ward had rebuilt a unit from scratch and forged it into something sharper than anyone predicted. The brass called it anomalous performance. The recruits called it survival. But the Rangers had another word for it: humbling. And yet Elise didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She didn't even acknowledge victory. Because to her, none of this was a game. None of it was for points on a board. Every drill, every mission, every simulated firefight was a rehearsal for the chaos waiting beyond the wire. The kind of chaos she had lived inside for 3 years, while everyone else believed she was dead. Some nights, the recruits saw her walking alone along the seawall, staring out at the dark water. Nobody approached her. Nobody dared. She carried an aura of distance, as though part of her was still out there in the dust and heat of some forgotten canyon. And maybe it was. Some scars don't heal, they just harden into silence. But silence can teach louder than words. The transformation of the unit didn't go unnoticed. Other commands sent observers. Quiet men in plain clothes appeared at the grinder, watching Elise with eyes that catalogued more than they revealed. Rumors swirled. Was she being groomed for higher command? Had she returned to lead not just trainees, but the SEALs themselves? Master Chief Donovan asked her once, in the privacy of the command office. "What's next for you, Commander? After this?" Elise paused. Her hands were folded, knuckles white against the desk. "I didn't come back to climb ladders. I came back because warriors were drifting. They need anchors, not speeches." The chief studied her. Anchors don't usually carry ghosts. For the first time, Elise allowed the corner of her mouth to twitch, something close to a smile, though colder, sharper. Maybe ghosts are what anchors are made of. Weeks turned into months. The recruits graduated, harder and sharper than the Navy had seen in years. Some went on to deployments, others to advanced schools. But all of them carried one thing into the field: the memory of a woman who had walked back from the dead to teach them discipline. And then came the day Elise knew had been waiting for her all along. The message arrived without ceremony. A simple envelope on her desk, stamped with clearance levels most officers would never touch. Inside, a single sheet. No mission brief, no detailed plan. Just a line of text. Report to Special Operations Command. Immediate. The next morning, another black helicopter carried her away from Coronado. The recruits watched from the grinder, silent as the blades tore the sky. They knew what it meant. She wasn't theirs anymore. She was being called somewhere higher. Somewhere darker. Special Operations Command had been watching her since the day she reappeared. They knew the Navy needed more than instructors. They needed leaders forged from fire, unbroken by death, capable of carrying shadows without losing themselves. And Elise Ward, the Revenant, was the perfect choice. When she walked into that briefing room, filled with admirals and generals, no one mentioned the granite wall with her name etched into it. No one spoke of the folded flag or the funeral 3 years earlier. They all knew. They all chose silence. Because what mattered now wasn't the past. What mattered was what she represented: resilience beyond reason, discipline beyond fear. They offered her command. Not just of a squad, not just of a team. Of an entire SEAL group. For a long moment, Elise said nothing. The weight of the offer pressed down like armor. She thought of the recruits she'd molded, the missions she'd run in the shadows, the comrades who hadn't come back. And then she gave the only answer she could. "I'll lead," she said. "But only if they remember discipline is freedom. Otherwise, we're just ghosts pretending to be alive." The room fell silent. And with that, Elise Ward, once listed Kia, buried in memory, written off as a casualty, took her place at the head of the Navy SEALs. Her legend didn't end there. It only grew. Every operator who trained under her carried stories into the field. Stories of precision so sharp it felt inevitable, of eyes that saw danger before it existed, of a commander who demanded nothing more than the discipline to survive. Some whispered that she was no longer fully human, that dying had burned out fear and left only steel. Others insisted she was proof that resilience could be taught, not just inherited. But those who truly knew her understood the truth. Elise Ward wasn't a ghost. She was a mirror. A reflection of what every warrior could become if they stripped away ego, embraced silence, and chose discipline over everything else. And so, the Revenant became more than a legend. She became a creed. Which leaves us with a question. What would you do if someone you believed was gone returned, not weaker, not broken, but sharper than before? Would you follow them into the fire, or would their very presence remind you of your own limits? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, we read every one. And if Elise's story reminded you that resilience is the sharpest weapon of all, hit like and subscribe for more stories about warriors who refuse to stay buried. Share this with someone who's been underestimated, someone who's been written off, someone who needs to remember that ghosts don't always haunt. Sometimes, they lead. Because in the end, Commander Elise Ward proved a truth too powerful to stay hidden. You can bury a soldier. You can even etch their name in stone. But if they still have discipline in their bones, no grave on earth can hold them.